Chicago, 2011. A cop is murdered. Police and prosecutors swear they have the trigger man. He swears he didn't do it. How far will each side go to prove they're right?
Like it's just one bombshell after another, where you're like, what?
The story of a PlayStation, a brain-eating amoeba, and the relentless pursuit of justice. Off Duty, out now. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Howdy, howdy, ho, and welcome to Fantasy Fan Fellas. I'm Hayden, producer of the Fantasy Fangirls podcast and your resident lover of all things Sanderson.
And I'm Steven, your bookish internet goofball, but you can call me the Smash Daddy.
And we are currently deep diving Brandon Sanderson's fantasy epic, Mistborn. But here's the catch. Steven here has not read Mistborn before.
That's right, hey. So each week, you'll get my unfiltered, raw reactions to every single chapter.
And along the way, we'll do character deep dives, magic explainers, and Steven will even try to guess what's next. Spoiler alert, he'll be wrong.
Newsflash, I'm never wrong. Episodes come out every Wednesday, and you can find Fantasy Fan Fellas wherever you get your podcasts.
That new thing? Yeah, we've got it. The Drop by GNC, bringing you all the newness that matters. Handpicked by the pros who actually know what's up and what's proven to work. We keep you on top of the trends and dialed into what's next. Whether you're crushing it at the gym, leveling up your game, or thriving every day, The Drop by GNC is where the latest solutions in health and wellness land first. Non-stop innovation and fresh finds daily. Explore what's new and what's next on The Drop by GNC.
Hello, and welcome to the Psycholegal Pop Podcast. This is a podcast where we talk about popular culture through the lens of an attorney and a therapist. I'm the therapist, Tess Brigham. Normally, my sister Brooke would say that she's the attorney, but this week we are covering the last two episodes of the O.J. Simpson American Manhunt: O.J. Simpson. So because we talked so long, we divided it into two episodes. So if you have not heard us discussing the third part, that should be below this episode in wherever you listen to podcasts. And so in this episode, we are mainly talking about the last episode of this four-part series. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. Enjoy.
Okay, so this episode is called The Verdict, and starts off with a bang with, God, I love Barry Sheck. He's just someone you want that guy in your corner. So the DNA scientist guy, who also I like too. I can't remember
the first guy. Oh, you're talking about Bill Thompson? Because there's another Bill in this. Oh no, that's Mike. Who's his Gilbert? Man? Yeah, Mike okay. Gilbert. I kept getting those two names mixed up.
And there's a lot of people in here. And you notice they're all being interviewed in these, I don't know if this is like a background, like a AI background or something.
Yeah.
But they're all inside like an empty warehouse with files all over the floor.
Well, I noticed that, where Mark Furman was and Kim Goldman, they're in like an empty room.
House.
But Bill Thompson, the DNA guy, is a mess.
And Geraldo's in a room with like filing cabinets spilling over and files on the floor, and it's like this empty warehouse, like a mob, something it just has. Like what are these backgrounds?
Yeah, I don't know. I thought that was weird because I would be a little bit like, you guys are making me look like I'm insane.
I know.
I mean, if you're a DNA expert, don't you want things to look orderly?
Yeah, you want to be in like a clean lab environment.
Yes.
Not with like a hoarder's office with papers stacked up everywhere. So he says with DNA, there's three problems here.
Mm.
There's tampering, planting, and then just plain gross negligence. And pretty much all three of those are at play here.
Yes.
So they said they had Peter Neufeld and Barry Sheck watching hours and hours and hours on video of how all this evidence was being collected by Dennis Fung and all the other technicians. And it was just a shit show of cross-contamination of evidence. And like Fung is touching things with his bare hands.
Yeah.
Sometimes. And like people are handing stuff off to each other. People are traipsing in this crime scene, traipsing around in the blood, and blood from over here is getting traveled over here. And like I said, the blanket, I mean, it was terrible. And I think that, again, people think that you have to have like huge amounts of blood to cross-contaminate. And this guy is saying, no, you don't. I mean, there could have been some DNA from Ron Goldman that was contaminated to Nicole, that then got contaminated to something that OJ touched or something. You know what I mean? And OJ's DNA could be on that blanket. He spent time with her.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, they basically said Fung was incompetent, and then I come back to, so Fung's the best you got? Like, this is a huge case. This. Why is he the lead? And I noticed too, when I was watching those clips, I was like, he isn't wearing gloves. He's got like 2 grocery bags and putting stuff in his car and stuff. It did seem a little odd that this guy's the head and you're letting him be in charge of all of this. And he really doesn't seem to know what he's doing, nor have you guys spent a lot of time prepping him for his, for cross-examination at all. Well, this is the beginning of DNA. So let's remember that. This is, but that's not an excuse. And I have a feeling that 95% of what he did was probably okay. But the other 5%, I mean, these mistakes can be fatal.
Yeah.
It doesn't take a lot. Like if you screw up one sample, you have, you can transfer very small quantities of, biological material, and it can create problems with all of the testing. Yeah. It's just very sensitive. And so garbage in, garbage out again. And there was also other evidence of planting. Like there's pictures where the glove is first photographed and it's in one position, and then it's photographed again, it's in a different position.
Yeah, I never knew about that either. That's why there's all this reasonable time. I'm like, oh yeah, that is odd. I just didn't realize that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just been, again, I think the narrative of what happened was so shaped by other things that the details kind of got lost. Like the real, what was really going on here. And then juror Yolanda comes back. She says she really liked Barry Scheck.
Yeah.
He really made an impression, I think, on the jury. And it was funny. They were talking about how some of the lawyers did not like Barry Scheck because, he's this New York guy. He's like, real abrasive. But
was that Shapiro? Shapiro didn't like Barry Scheck, right?
Probably. I think it was a couple of them.
Yeah.
A couple of them didn't like it.
But OJ liked him.
Yes, OJ knew. OJ actually had good instincts for, because OJ's the one who said, Shapiro, you're out. Cochran, he's my guy. He's going to defend me.
Yeah.
And I think OJ had a very big part in all of this and saying, who he wanted to do what.
He was paying for it. It's his decision in the end. And hold on, real quick, Alan Dershowitz was also caught, right, with his pants down at some point. He also had, I was just thinking about that Jeffrey Toobin thing, and I'm like, so he calls up his old friend, Alan Dershowitz. I'm like, oh, interesting.
The other pervert.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know Dershowitz has done a few things in his time.
Dear God. What is wrong with men?
Actually, Bailey's dead, but I think Dershowitz is still alive. Yeah.
What is wrong with these people? What is wrong with people? Like, what is wrong with men? I don't get it. Okay, keep going.
That's a whole nother show.
Yeah, I know. I'm just perplexed. I'm still focused on Jeffrey Toobin and just like, what was he thinking that day on that Zoom meeting? I have to know. Okay, keep going.
Know. I'm sure there'll be a documentary about him coming out.
Oh God, we've got to cover it. Thank you. I need that.
Yeah, someone needs to make a documentary about all these disgraced, like Charlie Rose.
Oh yeah.
Jeffrey Toobin, Matt Lauer, who we saw in this.
Oh yes, we saw Matt Lauer. That's right.
So another one of the issues with the blood was that So when they took blood from OJ, and whenever you draw blood from someone, there's a preservative inside the vial to preserve the blood. It's called EDTA. And so a lot of the blood that was found on that back gate, and I think in some other place, and also the blood on the sock that no one found until, after the fact, it had traces of EDTA in it, which means it was probably once in a vial. It's not like it came from someone's body onto it.
Well, but Tom Lang said that paint has EDTA in it and other household chemicals. So it's possible it came from the paint from the back gate. That was his argument. I'm not saying.
Yeah, it could. This is just reasonable doubt.
Yeah.
Reasonable doubt. And the blood on the sock, I guess they tested it 3 times and there was no blood. And then they got a tip. Carl Douglas said they got a tip from someone saying to test the sock again or something. And that's when they found the blood with the EDTA in it. So anyway, just something to think about. And then Yolanda comes back and she says, this was a problem to her.
Yeah.
That how this was collected and what was done with the blood, carrying it around in Phil Van Adder's bag or whatever he did, it was a problem. It was a problem. And then they talk about the guy who saw OJ dump that bag at LAX where they suspect maybe the murder weapon was there. And they were supposed to call him to testify, but he never got called.
Well, and Marcia Clark claimed, it's just his testimony. But that's not true because it could be corroborated. The things that this guy, Russ, the guy that witnessed OJ throwing something away, could be corroborated by the testimony of the limo driver. Because the limo driver also talked about there was a bag.
He saw the bag. Yeah.
I mean, again, I guess I'm just wondering why Marcia Clark didn't call him. I don't know.
We'll never know unless she writes another book.
Yeah, but the best is when Fung is up on that stand, poor guy, for like 9 days or something.
Yeah.
But when he leaves, he shakes everyone's hands. He shakes OJ's hand.
Yeah.
Almost kind of like, good job. You guys got me. Kind of throwing his hands up.
Yeah, and then I looked him up.
Where's Dennis now?
I think he's still... Well, he didn't get fired or anything. He was still head of I'm not sure if he still works there, but he went on to work there for many more years. I don't know. He's probably retired by now. I keep forgetting this is 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So, so now we come to the pinnacle, the whole holy moment in the trial where Christopher Darden just decides, I don't know if did he even discuss this with Marcia Clark? I think
so. It sounds like there were some meetings and such, but the whole thing was, the way Carl Douglas described it, and he's absolutely right. Like Dad told us that, right? You never ask a question in court where you don't know what the answer is. But why do you have someone do a demonstration where you don't know exactly how the whole thing's going to turn out? It just seems so bizarre that not one person stopped him. And again, I feel like this is a theme that we've seen, which is Marcia Clark. A lot of these people just leave people to hang out and dry, like to not just, okay, well, you made that mistake, so now I'm separating myself from you. And I hate people like that. I can't stand that.
Yeah, I don't know why this wasn't stopped. It was hard to tell what was going on internally. But Chris Darden wants OJ to try on both of the gloves. To prove, because they got fixated on these gloves and they got tape from the NFL to show that OJ was wearing these exact same gloves when he was interviewing someone on the field, and they just got really obsessed with it and the size of the gloves and
I always thought that was so weird with the gloves because it's not like these were purple sparkly gloves that very few people have. They're black leather gloves that everybody in the world has. Everybody.
Well, they were a certain brand. And they were like fur lined, I think. And they were a certain brand. They knew the brand and the size and all that kind of stuff. And remember that there was also a lot of hullabaloo about the size of his foot and the shoe. Remember the Bruno ugly shoes?
Yes.
And he's like, I would never wear those ugly ass shoes. But then they have tape of him, wearing the shoes. I mean, a lot of it just was kind of stupid. But anyway, he has to put on the latex gloves underneath the gloves because, they don't want it to get contaminated. Yeah. And so and then prior to this, so I didn't realize until this very last episode how close he and Mike Gilbert were. Mm-hmm. Mike Gilbert was the one who told him, well, just don't take your arthritis medicine that day. Because apparently he knew it was coming. They talked about it beforehand. Because I think that I'm sure they had some kind of motion they had to get. Whenever you're going to ask for something is going to be controversial, you don't just do it. You don't just spring it on the judge because you don't want the jury to hear that this is something controversial. Mm-hmm. So out of the presence of the jury, every day the lawyers go in and they do motions to clear the way to get evidence in to the case. Mm-hmm. So they obviously had a motion about it saying that they want OJ to try the gloves on. And it was, argued and debated or whatever. And so he knew it was coming. And so Mike tells him, well, just don't take your arthritis medicine that day. Mm-hmm. And he's like, oh, well, but if I don't, my knuckles will be all swollen. And that's it. And he's like, yeah, that's the point. So he didn't take his medicine. Mm-hmm. He really could barely get the gloves on. And he's being very theatrical about it.
Yeah, he's using all those acting skills that he has.
Yeah. And he's putting his hands up, like showing the jury, like, see, they don't fit. He's like walking closer to the jury. Like he's doing a performance. He's like owning this courtroom with his performance. And he's talking to the jurors. Mm-hmm. He's saying, see, they don't fit. They don't fit. It's like, what is happening?
Yeah. Yeah, but that's the part I don't understand. And Chris Darden didn't really explain that. Like, did he and Marcia and some other people on the case talk about it? So what would happen if this happened? What would happen if that happened? He says this. He said we can feel the case slipping through our fingers. So we felt like we needed to do a Hail Mary.
Wow,
it just seems so odd. Yeah. Which again makes me think that these people are really siloed. Do you know what I mean? It's almost like he makes this unilateral decision and then it's like, versus maybe you guys need to work more like a team.
Yeah.
Like a dream team.
Yeah. And then after that failed experiment, everyone kind of iced out Darden. Yeah. Marcia was pissed and
But it's like, you're running this thing. You can't be mad at him. You're in charge. You could have said no.
Yeah, they were not a cohesive team, it seemed.
No, they were not.
So then the prosecution rests their case on a low note.
Yeah, bad place to rest. And the defense takes over.
The defense takes over in their first scene. Well, at least the first one. I don't know if she was actually the first, but the first one we see is Laura Hart McKinney, the screenplay writer extraordinaire, who I don't know how she got hooked up with Mark Furman, but I think he was more like trying to show off, saying, yeah, I used to be I guess at the time he still was, I'm a LAPD officer and I've seen some shit and let me tell you. And it seems like he was showing off for.
Yeah, was he or single at the time? I always kind of got the sense that he kind of liked her or something, or kind of wanted to show her what a badass he was.
Yeah.
But and so, what was Mark Furman's defense for this? Because I assumed that this meant that these were she taped conversations between the two of us, between the two of them, where he's telling her about his time being a police officer. Okay, but he then says, maybe I misinterpreted this, but he said, well, I was just telling her stories, like fanciful stories about.
Wow.
Did you remember him saying that? Because it seemed like a very bad defense. I didn't quite get it.
I think that's just something he's saying after the fact. because he's desperate. But when he was talking to her, he was talking in the first person.
Yeah.
I did this. We did that. This happened. No, it was all first person accounts, and he's desperate. I don't even know why he has. I'm glad he came and did this documentary, but why?
Yeah, you're not telling us anything.
You're just making yourself look worse. You're not getting anything out of this. You're not clearing your name in any way. We actually think worse of you now.
Yeah.
So I don't know why you agreed to do this, but no, I think he's just saying anything like, oh, well, I didn't really mean that. He's just lying. Again, he's a liar.
Yeah, I think the thing is,
liar.
The problem is that Mark Furman doesn't think that he is, quote unquote, a bad guy. And it's a little bit like, yeah, you are.
Yeah.
Do you know, there's a little bit of this like, well, I'm not a racist. I'm not this. I'm not that. It's like, anyway, we're all racist. We all have racist tendencies. Like, that's a more honest answer than these answers that he's giving. I'm very frustrated with him. I really wanted to know, like, be truthful.
Well, we're never going to know. He's a liar. He's never going to.
I guess he doesn't have the introspection that I was hoping.
And also, the judge only allowed 2 of, because, there was tons of snippets of these tapes they wanted to get in.
Yes.
And the judge would only allow 2, but it was enough. Apparently, it was enough. It's all it took. And Cochran was pissed off about that. And he said the cover-up continues, by only allowing 2 of these.
Well, what do you think? Because I could see Judge Ito being a little bit like, okay, do we really need all the stories are awful. Like it's what we just heard on this, I think that would be enough. And I got it. And I understand why Johnny Cochran took that and ran with it, because that's his job.
Yeah.
But I don't think that only 2 was such a terrible thing.
Well, again, it did the job.
Yeah.
So then the prosecution, they totally abandoned him. He has to come in and plead the 5th. And Marcia Clark won't even, try to rehabilitate him.
Yeah.
She could have gotten up there and questioned him and tried to rehabilitate his character, asked him questions. No, completely abandoned him. And I kind of agree that he didn't have any choice but to plead the 5th.
Yep.
And, in the end, he's the only person who actually gets prosecuted in this case for perjury, for lying on the stand.
Yeah.
So, and Yolanda pipes in and she says that basically this pleading the 5th, she says he was basically saying yes.
Yeah.
That he did say these things.
Yeah. And we heard the tape.
Right. We heard it.
We heard you on the tape.
Right. And then in OJ, continually working his charm, of course they did not want him to testify. That would have been the worst thing ever. And so he gets up in front of the court and he says, Your Honor, I really want to testify and tell you all about how I just had nothing to do with this. But I don't want to keep the jury here any longer. And I trust them. I trust that they can, do the right thing. And I haven't seen my kids in a year. And he's
I was like, oh, crying. He's good.
And it's like, you're basically testifying.
Yeah. With no objections, with no objections, cross, with no cross. Yeah. And how was he allowed to do that? I didn't know you could make a little speech when you can't. Yeah. So why did Judge Ito stop that?
I don't know. I don't even know. I think, there's a procedural thing where if you are going to waive your right to testify, the judge does have to ask you on the record. You understand that you have the right to testify, and is it your intention to waive your right? And the defendant has to say yes and do all that. But they don't let them go on and make a speech. So I think OJ just did it and nobody stopped him. He did it real fast and real quick before anyone, could even object or figure out what was going on.
And so smooth. I have to say, because he's like, I don't want to keep people here any longer, and I miss my kids, and You're just like, oh, you're good. You are good.
He's OJ. That's why. Why everyone liked him.
I have to say, these closing arguments, because again, I did not know that I knew the famous line I knew the famous infamous line, but I did not know that this was Johnny Cochran's, like the way in which he closed it. And it was genius. I mean, the man is genius, truly, truly brilliant.
Yeah. It was all emotion.
Yeah.
It was all emotion. It was sending a message, he's quoting Furman. He's talking about a cover up. I mean, it was just all emotion.
Because basically it's like, you can change history. There has been, and that was the thing. Johnny Cochran wasn't wrong. He was absolutely right. There's a history. There's an injustice in this country. You can send a message. You can change things. We want things to change. You can do it. This is your part of it, which is so brilliant to do, because it had nothing to do, because basically what he was saying is, we all know what this is really about. It's about the corruption. OJ, don't even pay. Like, he's not even mentioning anything about the like, there's no murder. There's no nothing.
No, it's not talking about the evidence or anything.
No, this is your chance to do something. And I think the combination of just how terribly, just how good they were at giving you all the reasonable doubt, plus you're being sent off into the jury room being told this is your chance to send a message, I would have acquitted. I'm telling you that right now. I would have. I think if I was one of these people.
Yeah. And Marcia, she just, first they weren't even going to they were going to cut Darden out. Mm-hmm. He was sidelined. She was just going to do it all by herself. And he apparently got really upset, pissed off, and wrote his resignation letter or whatever. And they're like, oh, okay. And that would have been terrible to not let him talk after he was the co-counsel, like doing half of this case.
Yeah.
I mean, they thought they could just write him. They were so pissed at him. They're just going to write him right off. So, theirs is all fact-based, going through the facts. And it's like, at this point, the jurors don't care.
Yeah.
They are not listening to this. And then Barry Scheck gave a little closing too. Mm-hmm. And he talked about how it's contaminated, compromised, and corrupted, and it's a cover-up.
Yeah. And then Cochran says, if you don't stop this cover-up, then who? It's like, yeah.
Yes.
Cochran.
And then, if it doesn't fit, you must acquit. One of the greatest moments in courtroom history. Yes. So it's all over. It's 7 months.
Yeah.
It was 7 months total. Was it 7 months from the time of the arrest till the trial, or the end of the trial?
Well, I think he was arrested in June or July. June of 94. The trial started in January of 95.
Okay.
And then the verdict came out in September, right? Of 97. 96.
Psych Legal Pop will be right back after these messages.
Chicago, 2011. A cop is murdered. Police and prosecutors swear they have the trigger man. He swears he didn't do it. How far will each side go to prove they're right?
Like, it's just one bombshell after another, where you're like, what?
The story of a PlayStation, a brain-eating amoeba, and the relentless pursuit of justice. Off Duty, out now. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Howdy, howdy, ho, and welcome to Fantasy Fan Fellas. I'm Hayden, producer of the Fantasy Fangirls podcast and your resident lover of all things Sanderson.
And I'm Steven, your bookish internet goofball, but you can call me the Smash Daddy.
And we are currently deep diving Brandon Sanderson's fantasy epic, Mistborn. But here's the catch. Steven here has not read Mistborn before.
That's right, hey. So each week, you'll get my unfiltered, raw reactions to every single chapter.
And along the way, we'll do character deep dives, magic explainers, and Steven will even try to guess what's next. Spoiler alert, he'll be wrong.
Newsflash, I'm never wrong. Episodes come out every Wednesday, and you can find Fantasy Fan Fellows wherever you get your podcasts.
94. Oh, wow. No.
95. Sorry, 95.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm getting my dates wrong.
Okay, so the trial was
started in Yeah. So it started in January of 95. Yeah. Because I was back, I had graduated from college. I was back home and I was working in the city. Yeah. And it was like, I want to say
I think it was September.
September of
Okay.
95. Yes. So I think it was 7 months to the trial and then another 7 months of that.
Yeah. And also just to try a double homicide after only 7 months of preparation, that's kind of unheard of.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of their tactics where they were not going to waste time. They were going to force the speedy trial thing. And so that handicapped the prosecution a lot.
And the fact that, you know, I mean, again, this was a case also about with money. I mean, you had two of the greatest legal minds, right? Barry Scheck and Neufeld, like scanning hours and hours. I'm sure it was their assistants scanning hours and hours and hours of of footage. I mean, just the sheer number of people they had working on the case for OJ.
Oh, it's millions of dollars.
The amount of time and energy you could take to every little thing. I mean, this was the one time that things were really lopsided. It's usually so much more for the person being prosecuted.
Yeah. Yeah. So Yolanda reveals, I thought this was very interesting. She says that she thought it would be several weeks because she said a lot of the jurors didn't get along. And I guess she anticipated more, disagreements among them. But they took a vote right out of the gate, and it was 10-2 for acquittal.
Yeah.
That was shocking. And it only took 3 or 4 hours of discussion to get to 12-0.
Yeah.
I mean,
because there was just too much reason. I mean, she's not wrong. There was too much reasonable doubt. They gave us a lot of reasonable doubt. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So everyone thought they were going to be deliberating for weeks. People were leaving to go on vacation. And then literally 4 hours later, they call everybody back to say, we're going to read the verdict tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. And so the next day, again, Marcia Clark, she's coming out of her house and there's some reporter, photographer, or someone out there. And she's like, oh, fuck off. Get the fuck out of here. I mean, she is just
fucking hit him.
She probably knows she lost.
Yeah.
I mean, that quick of a verdict is usually in favor of the defense. Because people do, I think if you're going to actually prosecute someone and send them to jail, I think people do take more time. But if they have a sense that, like, this is not right. There's not a lot to discuss or whatever.
Yeah. Well, there have been some very short deliberations and people have been convicted very quickly.
Oh, of course.
In our history. But yes, it is with the amount of information that they had to go through. It felt like the jury had already kind of not necessarily made up their mind completely, but it seems like they were all on the same page, basically.
Yeah. And then let's see.
Well, he's acquitted.
Everyone goes crazy. This is where we see the gatherings of white people, just crying and stunned, and Black people celebrating, and to characterize it that way. I mean, that was really sad. Like to see that division.
Yeah.
And I think it was it Darden or Douglas? I can't remember which one of them said it later, that they feel like it's even worse today.
Yeah. Yeah.
Than as bad as that looked back then. Like, it's even worse now.
But I think that was one of the things that when I think about this case and I think about all of this, it's like the celebration had nothing. It had to do with OJ, but I think it was just this feeling of finally we won. We won.
Right.
We got something. Someone's going to pay. Someone or not pay. Or this thing became bigger than the actual
person
or the act that they committed or anything. It became about what felt like what was fair or right.
Yeah. I mean, Douglas said OJ was a vessel for the decades of abuse, and he won in a system where they never win.
Yep. Yeah. So, and I can understand that.
Yeah. And again, white people assumed it had nothing to do with the evidence, that it was all just, sending a message. And they just ignored the contamination, the planting, all that stuff was just ignored because that's outside of their realm of possibility. Police don't do that. Why would the police want to frame OJ? Or why would they, as if OJ's any different than any other Black person? I mean, people might perceive him as such, but when it comes right down to it, he's still a Black person. And if you're that racist, I don't think you draw distinctions between this Black person or that Black person. So,
well, and I think that was the other part with the Rodney King and all of these other cases. You clearly see what these police officers are doing. We can all see it. And I think what was so powerful about this, about him being acquitted, was just the fact that finally it's being acknowledged. Finally, someone is saying, see, you guys plant evidence. See, this is a racist system. See? And that was what the celebration was. That's what it was.
Yeah. So Yolanda confirms that, it was a reasonable doubt case and that Furman just completely tainted the case. So then there was a party afterwards at OJ's house, but Robert Shapiro did not go to the party.
He did not. I saw Al Cowling there. He was there.
Oh, of course. You see, so
he's best friend.
He's his ride or die.
Yeah.
Shapiro went straight on Barbara Walters. They're watching it on the TV at his house at the party. And it's like, and that's where he said this. He said that the defense that he was on.
Yes.
Okay. Played the race card, and they played it from the bottom of the deck. So, I mean, how disloyal.
Yeah. Well, it's also, it's very gross because I get the vibe that it was almost like he was kind of like, well, I don't want my white country club friends, my white celebrity, the people that line my pockets. I don't want them associating me with all of this. Right. So I'm going to throw all of these people and my client and everybody else under the bus so I can separate myself. And now I can be seen as this kind of you know what I mean? Because it was interesting. What I liked about this documentary that we don't normally get is we kind of got like what it wasn't. When I looked up, I was like, oh God, we have 45 more minutes. What more are we going to talk about? And they really went into like what OJ was up to post.
Oh yeah. The story doesn't end there.
Yeah. The story doesn't end. And just the fact that, but the first thing that we learn is nobody wanted to be OJ's friend anymore.
He got kicked out of his country club. He couldn't play golf there anymore.
Because, and he could not, all of his friends didn't want to hang out with him. No country club, no nothing. And I think that's very much what Robert Shapiro was showing us in that moment of, no. Like, I have to get away from you now.
Yeah. Yeah. It was. I mean, life did not go back to normal for OJ. And of course, then the civil case followed right after. And it was tried in Santa Monica. So I don't think the jury was 100% white, but probably predominantly white jury.
And I'm sorry, in this civil case, did OJ have to testify?
Yeah.
He had to. He didn't have a choice but to.
You don't have a right against self-incrimination in a civil case, only a criminal case. So they deposed him.
There was a lot of wrestling. Like, did you hit her? No. Well, how did she get bruised? We're wrestling. Yeah.
It was awful. I mean, he was a horrible witness. It was a disaster for him. I mean, it was just, there was no way around it. And the burden of proof is lower. It's just preponderance of the evidence, just more like, 51% or actually less than that, 50.00001% more likely than not. And so there were no cameras in the courtroom. OJ had to testify. And I guess he never really took any responsibility for the domestic violence. Like you said, he wouldn't even admit that he hit her. And he was just a terrible witness, and he lost.
Yeah.
And it was unanimous verdict, and they awarded the families $33.5 million.
It is ridiculous that there is no repercussions, that it's basically you just throw it to them like, okay, now you collect the money now. Goldman.
Yeah, well, the government doesn't have the resources to go,
Yeah, I guess not.
collecting judgments for people. But also, too, it was also an excessive judgment because, this was it was a wrongful death case.
Mm-hmm.
Usually in wrongful death cases, you get the value of what that person would have given you if they had lived. So let's say your parent dies.
Mm-hmm.
And you lose out on the support that the children lose, and the wife or husband loses out on the support that parent would have brought. And that's why traditionally you don't get a lot of money for children dying because they're not valuable. They don't work. So, this was just piling it on, just because it's OJ, and I guess just because they could.
But he hid his money first. So maybe he knew this was coming, or a tax attorney. Someone gave him some advice. Sounds like.
Well, that's why he eventually moved to Florida, because Florida has very friendly laws towards, judgment debtors. So, and also his NFL pension apparently was safe from collection for some reason. So they could never touch his pension. And then when he moved to Florida, like his home in Florida was completely protected. Like in California, your home is not completely protected. You get what's called a homestead exemption. So it's protected up to a certain amount. But if you have more equity than that, then they can force the sale of your home. So Florida was a more friendly state for his situation. That's why he moved there. And yeah, but he didn't have, 3 years after this, he lost Rockingham to, a tax foreclosure. He owed like $700,000 in back taxes and penalties. That's not a lot of money for someone who used to be very wealthy. $700,000, he couldn't come up with that to save his house. That's pretty bad.
Yeah,
So
I can't imagine how much that defense cost him. And then obviously he couldn't get work.
He couldn't work. Yeah.
Nobody wanted, because the image was tainted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I don't know if I think this is after he moved to Florida, but he had to do like those weird reality shows, like Juiced, You Got Juiced or something. I mean, he was really desperate, but this I thought was fascinating. So Mike Gilbert, who, like I said, I didn't realize how close these two were till the end of this here. But one night, before it all ends, they're sitting around the pool talking. And Mike says, did he say this first or did OJ say it?
Well, OJ's talking about the tree.
Yeah, he's talking about this tree and something about how he and Nicole saved the tree. And now she's not here and she should have been here and blah, blah, blah. And Mike just kind of says something like, I always thought that you did it or something like that. And then OJ says, if Nicole hadn't opened that door with a knife, she would still be alive. And I kind of gasped. I was like, what?
Yeah.
But we don't know if that's true or not, or if that's just something he said that night. Because, this Mike Gilbert went on to write a book where he talks about this, and he couches it as a confession that OJ basically confessed to him that night. And they didn't really play that up in this documentary. So that it was a confession. I don't know. How did you take that?
Yeah, I saw it as kind of a confession, and then it sort of made sense. But the knife, what knife was she killed with? I thought they found the empty knife box at OJ's house.
Well, they found a empty knife box, but OJ had a bunch of knives. He collected knives and swords.
But it kind of made sense with that actually made sense, because as we were saying, we don't think it was premeditated. We think that he went over there because he was pissed or mad, or he was lurking around. Maybe she was chopping something. Maybe she was doing something. Maybe she picked up the knife and walked out there. Who knows? But it sounds like but it does sound like he went over there to confront her. And that he saw that knife and lost his goddamn mind. So maybe that knife that she was holding wasn't the murder weapon. Maybe he had one with him. I don't know. But he just apparently something about her brandishing that knife
Yeah, I think
Get him
she did
off.
brandish. And I think what happened was he went over there to confront her. He is storming in, as he does, knocking on the door, banging on the door. The door's locked, but he's there yelling, banging. And she gets scared and she grabs a knife. And I guess she opened the door. Maybe he broke down the door. I don't know, one or the other, but she brandished a knife to protect herself, and then he used it against her. And that makes sense because that's what happens. And if she had had a gun, she probably would have gotten the gun. That's what people do. That's why you have guns and weapons, for protection of, if that's what you want to do. So to me, I was like, wow, yeah, that did kind of all make sense, and it all sort of came together, and that could be a plausible explanation. And then Ron Goldman just happens upon this scene, and he goes to try to help her. So yeah, that was the closest thing that had ever come that I knew about, something that made sense.
Yeah, yeah, that made a lot. I mean, it did. It made sense to me for sure. And that's when Bill quit. That's when Mike quit.
Yeah.
And then I quit.
Yeah.
Because I don't think I can get past that.
This is not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And something they did not address at all is that this entire time, OJ's kids are living with him because he got custody of his children, of Nicole's children. So they'd been living with the Browns, and there was a little bit of a custody battle, but not a lot. And I think the Browns just kind of capitulated, and especially, and because the kids wanted to be with their dad.
Yeah.
Because I remember Denise saying that in their documentary, that they wanted to go. When he moved to Florida, they wanted to go and live with their dad.
Yeah.
And so this whole time that OJ's in Florida, and we see him doing all this weird stuff, and he's, hanging out with strippers, and
he's partying like a 20-something, like he's cocaine and strippers and partying and booze, like all of it.
He's got 2 young kids at home.
Yeah.
I think his daughter Arnell also went and lived. I think she lived with him up until his death. I'm sure she probably raised those kids.
Yeah, I'm sure.
He wasn't around. So, then cut to OJ is in. Now, did he move to Las Vegas? Or was he just in Las Vegas?
I got the sense that he was just visiting.
He was just there. Well, he was there with a mission. So he had heard that, I don't know, that some guy was selling a bunch of memorabilia, OJ memorabilia, signed footballs and whatever else. And this person had a lot of it. And so OJ went there with guns and some other people. He said just to get his property back.
Yes.
He just wanted to get his property back.
But he thought that guy Mike was there, right? Selling the material.
Well,
selling the stuff.
He thought that Mike had something to do with, that he was the source of this memorabilia. That Mike he had all this memorabilia left over from when he was his manager. And I think he maybe sold them to this guy who was then reselling them for more. And OJ got wind of this. And he thought, I don't know if he thought Mike would be there, because they said something about how the bullets had Mike's name on them, or metaphorically. I don't know, but Gilbert was kind of in the middle of this. So they go to this hotel room, and because they have guns and because they held them captive, and they charged them with kidnapping because they moved them from one room to another, which is technically kidnapping. They charged him and threw the book at him, and he got sentenced to 33 years, up to 33 years. And not everyone, but a lot of people were kind of like, well, good, he's getting what he deserves, even though one has nothing to do with it. I never felt that way. One has nothing to do with the other. It's but I do think that it does show that this was a violent man. Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think that it corroborates everything. It kind of proves a lot about who he was as a person.
Yeah. But he was such a good prisoner. He was a model prisoner, very nice. Everyone liked him, and he followed the rules, never got in trouble, participated in, acts of service. And
I'm sure people loved having him there. I'm sure he was great.
yeah.
I'm sure he was.
Oh, he's probably the most popular guy there.
Yeah.
So he served 9 years, and as soon as he was up for parole, they granted him parole. So, then he tries to make another comeback. Then he gets on Twitter.
I remember that too.
I remember that too. Wasn't that kind of during the pandemic too?
Well, no, he got on Twitter in June of 2019.
Okay. Well, yeah.
But,
and then
then the pandemic happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he was making all these crazy, where he's like, "Hey, it's OJ," and he had like these daily check-ins and words of wisdom. And
sadly, I do the same thing. I do it on TikTok if anyone wants to follow me, but I'm like, oh God, I'm OJ now, like getting on goddamn social media. Hi. Blah, 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 blah.
Yes. So then he just does that for a while, and then he passed away April of 2024 at age 76. I guess he had cancer.
Yeah. Do we know what kind of cancer he had?
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah. Nobody knew. It was kind of a surprise. Although the last video they showed of him, his last tweet or whatever, he did look really different. Looked bad.
I mean, the years did catch up to him. I mean, all the partying, that era, and then prison, you know, will do that to you. So yeah, he didn't look good. But and then Jeffrey Toobin makes that comment about how he should have died in prison. And then, the question then becomes, right? It's been 30 years. Is anything better? No. Unfortunately, it's not. And it's gotten worse.
Yeah, that is really sad to think about.
Yeah.
And, even just from a few years ago, because they showed some clips of, like George Floyd protests and, other things where we thought, okay, we're getting more awareness out of these we're trying to make out of these horrible tragedies awareness, and Black Lives Matter. And now here we are, like today, February of 2025. So yeah, it's a trip. It's really a trip. And yeah, this case, God, it affected so many people's lives in so many negative ways.
Yeah, it really did.
Just an all around tragedy for all the families involved and all the people around these families. And remains, I think, the trial of the century. I can't think of anything that.
Well, you know who's thriving? Carl Douglas. He seems to be the one who's like thriving the most.
I mean, Darden. Is Darden retired? I don't think he practices law anymore. Does he?
So he became a defense attorney. They said he becomes a defense attorney, and then he has his own practice.
Right.
But I'm like, that must be so hard to be Chris Darden. Now, like, how do you? And then I don't know if I would hire him. I'll be honest with you, as my defense attorney, I don't know if I would. So I just wonder how has he done? And there is a lot of I don't think Chris Darden thinks about this case all the time, but you get the sense that he's, I don't know, it's a little bit of bitterness, but also a bit of, unfortunately, just, it was one of the many casualties of this entire thing. And here are all the bodies of all the casualties. Because Kato Kalin is a casualty, never was able to have a career. The Goldman family, casualties. I mean, the Simpson, the Nicole's, the Browns, casualties. I mean, but even the woman who, all of these various people that testify, Dennis Fung, do you know what I mean? The jurors that are being looked at funny for making the choice that they made. There's a lot of people that walked away with their lives just upended,
turned upside down.
Yep.
Yeah. And so Darden became a defense attorney, and Carl Douglas, I guess, worked for Johnny Cochran up until his death. And then he started his own practice. And Mark Furman hasn't done anything.
Yeah, I've done nothing of note.
Yeah, he says he has this burden. Wow.
I don't know. You know what? Again,
Whatever.
but Mark Furman could do something with this. He could have worked on himself and then gone and given talks and talked about it and talked about anyway.
I don't think
the
he
process.
wants to. Clearly, he doesn't want to.
I know.
He's not. I don't think he believes he did anything wrong.
Yeah, I think that's part of the problem.
Yeah, because if he did, he would have he shows no contrition whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing. And frankly, again, I don't even know why he agreed to do this. What was the point?
Yeah.
Why do it if you're not going to come back and, give us an update and tell us what you've learned and how you've changed? Nothing has changed. So why are you here?
Yeah. No.
It's weird.
Yeah.
I don't know. My goodness, what a journey.
It was a journey, but I will want to say, I do appreciate how they ended it. They really talked about at the core, this was about domestic violence.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yes, it was about race. It is about race. I think we should stop when Darden says race does matter. Yes, it does matter. So let's start talking about it. Let's not pretend it doesn't matter. It matters. So let's start, if we just start acknowledging these things, then we can actually make some progress. But, just talking about how domestic violence is the lesson that, at the core, Nicole was afraid and she needed help, and she was not helped. And truly her story is very classic in the sense of the moment she separated herself, the moment she said, no more, I'm not going to take anymore. That's the moment she was killed. And that's the problem. That's why women don't leave. That's why we have these situations. She, I'm sure, many, many times wanted to get to that point, but felt like she couldn't. Mm-hmm. And, she finally got there, and this is how she was, and then she was killed. So, and then
especially with someone as powerful as O.J. Simpson.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Kim Goldman, I thought was very interesting at the end. She talked about, she feels like that we've really commercialized grief and fear and trauma. And that she's here to show people, how to process grief, how to think about these things, how to show up for them. And I give her a lot of credit for that, because she seems to be the one that's had, I don't know, I've read a lot of her stuff. I listened to her podcast. I think she is definitely one of the most interesting and evolved, person. I feel like she of anybody is the one who really has spent a lifetime trying to figure out what this all means and how do I do this differently and how do I change things. I really do. So.
Yeah. No, she's definitely, been out there. And, Denise Brown too.
Yes.
She had a lot. She was responsible for, getting the Violence Against Women Act, renewed, when it had to come up. I don't know how many years ago it was, but, she's very politically active with, domestic violence and trying to help people and stop it and bring awareness and all that stuff. And she's done a lot.
Yeah.
Done a lot.
Yeah.
So
Mark Furman, what have you done?
Let's never speak of him again.
Ugh. Yeah.
Gross. Okay.
All right. Well, just, get ready for the next OJ. What more is there to say?
How many more years until I'll be dead by then?
I don't know. I don't know. There might be more new documentaries.
All right. Well, gosh, this has been a long one. If you're still here, thank you. I just looked at the clock.
Yeah.
It's a good one. So we really enjoyed this. I hope you did too. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for your support. If you could support our podcast by subscribing, we would appreciate it. If you want more material from us, we have a Patreon where we do extra bonus episodes. So you can check that out on patreon.com at Psych Legal Pop. We are also on social media, all the socials, Blue Sky. We're not on X, but we're on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. And tell a friend about our podcast. Yeah. If you have someone who's as obsessed with this case as we are, forward them
tell them
episode. They might like it. And last week's episode too.
And we will be back on Friday for Love is Blind, our continuing
That's
Love is
right.
Blind coverage. Yeah, very exciting. BLM comes up in that too. Our friend, what's his name? Ben?
Yeah.
Is that the kid that's like, who's like, I don't really pay attention to that.
Yeah.
Even though
he lives in the city where, George Floyd was murdered, but he doesn't concern himself with that kind of stuff.
Yeah. No.
Doesn't think about it.
No.
Oh gosh, that group. Anyway, yeah, if you're watching Love is Blind, listen to our recaps. We're not very, I realized we were not very friendly or empathetic towards these people.
Well, I'd like to say I felt like I was friendly and empathetic. You were done. You were done.
I think the mistake that I made was just watching them all in a row and then just talking about it.
Yeah.
I got just worked up because I think maybe if I had watched one episode, talked about that episode, watched a second episode, talked about that, and maybe my feelings could have evolved better.
Yeah.
As opposed to just getting myself worked up in rage.
Well, and that's the thing, right? If we had done it episode by episode, I think we would have done it that way. And I think you would have heard like from that initial, like, oh, who are these people? Mm-hmm. Isn't this exciting? Love is in the air. But by the time we recorded, we were already salty.
Yeah. So I'm gonna have to watch the next 3 episodes and take a little time in between to kind of process.
Okay. That sounds good.
Okay. Check it out. Thanks everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Howdy, howdy, ho, and welcome to Fantasy Fan Fellas. I'm Hayden, producer of the Fantasy Fangirls podcast and your resident lover of all things Sanderson.
And I'm Steven, your bookish internet goofball, but you can call me the Smash Daddy.
And we are currently deep diving Brandon Sanderson's fantasy epic, Mistborn. But here's the catch. Steven here has not read Mistborn before.
That's right, hey. So each week, you'll get my unfiltered, raw reactions to every single chapter.
And along the way, we'll do character deep dives, magic explainers, and Steven will even try to guess what's next. Spoiler alert, he'll be wrong.
Newsflash, I'm never wrong. Episodes come out every Wednesday, and you can find Fantasy Fan Fellas wherever you get your podcasts.
That new thing? Yeah, we've got it. The Drop by GNC, bringing you all the newness that matters, handpicked by the pros who actually know what's up and what's proven to work. We keep you on top of the trends and dialed into what's next. Whether you're crushing it at the gym, leveling up your game, or thriving every day, The Drop by GNC is where the latest solutions in health and wellness land first. Non-stop innovation and fresh finds daily. Explore what's new and what's next on The Drop by GNC.
Pepsi Prebiotic Cola in original and cherry vanilla. That Pepsi taste you love with no artificial sweeteners, only 30 calories, just 5 grams of sugar, and 3 grams of prebiotic fiber. That great Pepsi taste with even more to love. Pepsi Prebiotic Cola. Unbelievably Pepsi.